Last week, we had an amazing experience here in our worship service. For those of you who were not here, don't ask me to describe it because I don't think I can. But all that I can say is that during the presentation of Come Follow Me and in the silence experienced in this congregation, it was as if together we had a keen awareness of the actual presence of Jesus Christ. It's true, I heard that from many others. The feeling has stayed with me all week long, as I'm sure it has with you as well. How about with you, Andrea? Yeah. As much as I would love to see it again, still, I know that now is the time to come down from that mountaintop experience and now to go about the business of what we sang about, which was that we have decided to follow Jesus, and we are ready to do that. Today's account of Mary and Martha affords excellent guidance. I've always loved this story, and why not? Almost every Sunday after church, my mother would invite someone extra to join us for dinner. Sometimes the guest was a newcomer, sometimes a missionary, or a recent widower. And invariably, being the social critter that I was, and my sister's smiling knowingly, I would plunk myself down and begin making conversation. More often than not, my banter was interrupted by my mother's call for assistance in the kitchen. But in response, I always came back with one pat reply, which admittedly gave me a great deal of mileage over the years. I'd say, "I'm being Mary. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm being Mary." Worked. Now, I am sure that my mother and certainly later my husband were sorry that that story ever found its way into the Bible, because it certainly did not improve my cooking skills one iota. But be that as it may, it took me years to realize that I had probably missed the point. As a child, I liked to assume that Jesus was saying that it's better to rest than to be busy. It's better to be still than to be active. It's better to talk than to work. Yet I do not think that is what he meant. Bottom line, I think what Jesus was talking about was attitude, and that sometimes if we allow ourselves to get distracted, the good can get in the way of the better. When I was a junior in high school in St. Paul Park, Minnesota, our church secretary and her family hosted an AFS student from Afghanistan. His name was Kiamidin Donish Paju. And he was a nice boy, but he had the misfortune of falling in love with his American brother's girlfriend. That was not good. Prom time rolled around. They both wanted to ask the same date, but Kiam was left out in the cold. Enter yours truly. Why? His American mother asked. Didn't he take the minister's daughter? She wasn't dating anyone. That happened to be true. So he did. He asked me. He rented the required attire. He bought me a corsage. He stood and had his picture taken with me. He did everything just right. Only one thing was missing. he didn't pay me any attention. Instead, his eyes were glued on his heartthrob all night. He watched her dance. He watched her laugh with her friends. He watched her walk to the punch bowl. But to put it more succinctly, he was distracted. I'm not sure if I cried that night or not. I may have, because I remember how much I wished that he would have really wanted to be with me. I wonder somehow if there isn't a parallel there as to how Jesus may have felt. Here Martha was doing all the right things. She welcomed him into her home, and then presumably she began cooking up a storm. He was company, someone special, and she wanted to do well by him. There was nothing wrong with that. But somehow, the good got in the way of the better. Because even in doing the right things, Jesus was all but invisible to her. Didn't she see in his eyes that he was saying a goodbye of sorts? Could she have perceived that from there he was headed for Jerusalem? And he knew what that meant. Yet Martha could not see that. Instead, from a practical point of view, Martha saw only her sister, her lazy, inconsiderate sister, who was leaving all the work to her. In other words, Martha's failing was that she allowed herself to get distracted, and her eyes turned away from Jesus. Can't you imagine Jesus saying, "Look at me, Martha, not at Mary. Don't let me be a burden to you. If you're going to serve me with gladness. Serve me because you really want to serve me. Serve me because to do so would bring you joy. That's what I want for you. I want your joy." John Ortberg of Menlo Park Presbyterian Church once wrote a very thoughtful piece he entitled "Try Softer." And in it, he made the point that often the people in the Gospels who were the most unhappy were the very ones who seemed to be trying the hardest to do things properly. They were working so hard at obeying the laws, at praying, at their tithing, at doing the things they were supposed to do the right way, that it got in the way of their accepting and loving other people who did things differently from the way they did. And consequently, they became judgmental. Their hearts started out in the right place, but then they got distracted by what others weren't doing, as did Martha. And in doing that, they lost their joy. They lost their joy in serving the Lord. One of our biggest dangers in life is that we can get so easily focused on the tasks at hand that then we can lose sight of the most important and precious gift of all, the gift of relationship. Relationship with Christ himself and with each other. The good sometimes does get in the way of the better. I know of no better illustration of this than of the story of two parents at a playground. One woman is worn to a frazzle. She's trying to coax her daughter to get off the teeter-totter right now. She's got a library book to return. She has extra groceries she has to buy. She has mail to be posted. Yet despite her pleas, her daughter fails to respond to her tone of urgency. Meanwhile, this same mother becomes aware of a father who is in a similar plight. She hears him call, and she hears his son's steady and constant refrain, "Just 5 more minutes, 5 more." Yet the father, in hearing that response, seems unfazed. And finally, in exasperation, the mother turns to him and asks, "How in the world can you stand there and be so patient?" The man looked at her and said, "Do you really want to know?" "It's because my wife and I had a son who was killed when he was 3 years old. He was riding his tricycle out in front of our driveway, and he got hit by a car. Obviously, I don't get to watch him anymore. And so now, when my other son asks for 5 more minutes, then the way that I think of it is that that's 5 more minutes that I get to enjoy him." One of the most common failures in life is crowding out the things that matter most with other things that do not matter quite as much. It's all about allowing ourselves to get distracted by outside pressures. We know, each of us knows how easily that can happen. But that's why the story of Mary and Martha is such a gem. It's a reminder which explains why Jesus commends Mary, that indeed in being present to him, she had chosen the better part. And we continually have that same choice before us. Yet whenever we choose him, we find that he blesses us with amazing peace, even in the face of overwhelming stress. So the message of this morning is serve. But serve the Lord with gladness, always with gladness, and may his joy be ours. Amen.